gave us that we have to do.
No, I
So do I.
they can send it to me.
The-Wannabe doctor.
Mm-hmm. His voice is not that bad.
Yeah, I'm gonna go down there today.
I tried. I think on the first couple, I had to have it done in SD because of my memory. But now that I'm doing it in HD, the voice should be louder. I hope so. Usually it does. It's usually the auto does HD too. So. It was just a thing I thought of like real quick. I don't know. I was just trying to think of something, but yeah, I do use that. I use it because everybody call me doctor anyway because I've always got. I got first aid kits like everywhere, and then like my first aid kit at home is like 2 backpack fulls of shit.
That's your expectation.
Staple. I got staple guns. I got antiseptics. I could practically do surgery with everything that I've got.
They have to be sealed.
Oh, they're all packaged. They're all packaged.
Draining my lungs, I'm draining through the pulmonary veins, I'm draining blood through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. If I'm draining any other systemic organ, it's going to be drained back into your right atrium. We did see a third type of vessels. This is the smallest type of vessels, and this is what we call the capillaries. Now remember, another name that was given to the capillaries, those are my exchange vessels. They are embedded inside your tissues. And remember, why did I call them exchange vessels? Because this is where the exchange is going to be taken place between the bloodstream and the tissues. So if I want to get oxygen, where would I get this oxygen to my cells? From my capillaries. If I want to release waste, which vessel would be allowing me to release the waste in? Who will collect the waste from my tissues is going to be my capillaries. The capillaries, they have a very tiny diameter. I have a very small diameter. I'm allowing only one red blood cell to pass at a time. So the diameter of the capillary only allows one red blood cell. And we're going to see many clinical applications of this later on when we discuss the different blood cells. So we're going to see that the red blood cell, for example, is compressible because of its shape. Why do I need to maintain the normal shape of the red blood cell? Because simply, if it was larger, it would be so difficult for it to travel through your capillaries. If you remember, we did have two classifications of the capillaries and a structural classification. And remember, we did classify those capillaries into three different types according to the structure. First type is going to be by continuous capillaries. And remember, continuous capillaries, those are the capillaries that will have a minimal connection to the outside. So how am I able to conduct the fluids from inside of my capillaries to the outside, to the surrounding tissue? This will be taking place through my intercellular clefts. See here, those clefts between the endothelial lining of my capillary. This is what we're going to call the intercellular cleft, because this is the only path for me to conduct fluids, salts from inside to the outside and from the outside to the inside. Are you able to allow large chemical compounds to travel? Yeah. Am I able to allow cells to travel through the continuous capillaries? No. What you can only allow here to pass through the continuous capillaries is going to be the fluids and small solids. I am the least permeable type of capillaries. So where do you need only to allow fluid carrying gases and solids to travel? What kind of organs? My brain, skin, and my muscles. I don't need much exchange. I'm not allowing cells to travel between the blood and those organs. I'm not allowing large chemical compounds to travel between those organs and my blood. What I only allow is going to be the fluids carrying the gases and solids and small solids. So I don't need much permeability in here in those organs. Who will provide me with a higher level of permeability is going to be my fenestrated capillaries. And remember, fenestrated capillaries are called fenestrated because simply I have, guess what do we have? Yeah, we have fenestrations. That's why we are called fenestrated capillaries. And what are the fenestrations? Those are exactly the holes in the endothelial lining of the vessel. So do I have more or less permeability compared to the continuous capillaries? Can you guess? More permeability. So fenestrations of the endothelial lining of those capillaries will provide a higher permeability compared to the continuous capillaries, which I'm only able to conduct fluids in and out of my blood through the intercellular clefts. But here I can conduct much more fluid, even larger chemical compounds. And where do I need to conduct large chemical compounds between the organ and the bloodstream? Like in my intestines. In my intestines, I'm absorbing large chemical compounds, and I need to conduct those large chemical compounds to my bloodstream. So I need a higher permeability, which cannot be provided by your continuous capillaries. Where else? Where else do you conduct large chemical compounds? Kidneys. Why do you need a higher permeability in the kidneys? To allow filtration, to allow the reabsorption and the secretion to take place. Because as we're going to see in the next chapter, how do we form urine? It's a matter of exchange between your blood vessels and the kidney tubules. So you first going to be allowing the filtration. So I need the fluids, large amounts of fluids, large amounts of solids, to travel from my blood to my kidney tubules. And then I need to recollect large amounts of fluid back from the kidney tubules to my blood. I need to recollect the nutrients. So if I did allow glucose to travel here in my kidney tubules, I did just eat, so I don't want to lose this glucose out in the urine. I need to get all this glucose back into my blood. So how would I be able to allow this glucose to travel back? How would I allow the amino acids to travel back in my bloodstream? Through those penetrated capillaries that will be located around my kidney tubules.
So I know like a lot of people like to have diabetes it affect their kidneys. Is it because of the high levels of sugar not being broken down like it's supposed to, is causing those capillaries like be blocked to affect the kidneys? Is that or
So you're asking why will it will I get a chronic kidney disease, or why do I have sugar in the urine?
why? No, yeah, I'm trying to figure out why it seems to affect the kidneys. This is like just by everybody knows.
Yeah, it affects the kidney. But let me first answer, why do I have glucose in the urine if I'm getting this glucose back, if I'm supposed to get this glucose back from the kidney tubules?
Okay.
So normally the glucose gets filtered here into the urine, or the filtrate that will then become urine after it gets modified. Normally, I have receptors to pick up all this glucose back to my blood. But because I have a limited number of those receptors, if I am releasing large amounts of glucose, because I have very high blood sugar level, because the insulin is not capable to get this glucose inside my cells, so the glucose will remain high in my bloodstream. So the amount of glucose that will be filtered gonna be much higher than my ability to reabsorb.
Okay.
So I'm releasing larger amounts than my ability to get back into the bloodstream. So large amounts of this glucose will remain outside in my kidney tubules and will travel out with the urine. But why will I get a problem having uncontrolled diabetes? Having uncontrolled diabetes might end up with by having a chronic kidney disease or renal failure, because of something that the diabetes will be causing is called arthritis obliterans. And arthritis obliterans is from its name, and artery obliteration. So the pathophysiology here, I'm causing inflammation of the terminal arteries, the end arteries that are conducting the blood in here. So as I get inflamed, what's going to happen? Your body will respond by forming connective tissue. So as I respond to this inflammation here, by forming connective tissue instead of my endothelial lining, because those endothelial cells got inflamed. So it's going to be so difficult for me to filter the blood now. So the blood is not filtered, as if I don't have a kidney. And if the kidney is not functioning, this is what we call the renal failure. Alright, so here again, so back. What kind of vessels will I see in the kidney? Fenestrated capillaries. What else? Where else can I see fenestrated capillaries? In my glands, endocrine glands. So why in your endocrine glands you need a higher permeability? You don't want to have continuous capillaries in your endocrine glands simply because you are producing large chemical compounds from those glands that need to be released out in the bloodstream. What did we call those chemical compounds? Hormones. So we are releasing hormones in the bloodstream, which will need higher permeability level, which will be provided in here by the fenestrated capillaries. A third type of capillaries that we've seen last time, remember? Sinusoidal capillaries, and those will be larger. They will have more spaces between my endothelial cells. So I have large intercellular clefts. I have much larger fenestrations in my endothelial lining to provide the maximum permeability possible. And why do I need maximum permeability? Because either I'm conducting very large chemical compounds, or I'm even moving cells in and out of my bloodstream. So where first you're going to be moving cells in and out? Like where? In your bone marrow, in your spleen. So in the bone marrow and spleen, this is where you're going to be storing lots of blood cells. Actually, your blood cells are going to be formed in your bone marrow. They are produced. You have the precursor cells of those blood cells in your bone marrow. So you're going to be building up those blood cells and then release them from your bone marrow into the bloodstream. So I need a maximal permeability. That's why I have what kind of capillaries? Sinusoidal capillaries. Provide maximal permeability. How again? I have very large intercellular clefts. I have large fenestrations in my endothelium. All right. According to the function, we did classify the capillaries into two types. Can you remember what are the two types according to the function? I'm either forming a direct connection between the arteriole and the venule without allowing any exchange to take place, and those are called my metarterioles or vascular shunts or metarterioles. The other type of capillaries that we've seen, and this one is going to be responsible for the actual exchange between your bloodstream and the cells. Those are my true capillaries. And we call them true because this is where I will be performing the exchange. So why do you think I will need to have this kind of capillaries to connect the vessels, the arteriole to the venules directly without performing exchange? Why should I have it in the first place? You remember? Why would I keep a capillary that it's not performing exchange?
In case of a large blood loss, like car accidents.
You're gonna do what? Redirect to the blood. Yes. So you see on here, if I don't want to get blood to my skin, what I need to do, and this is one of the capillary beds in my skin. Do you want to deliver the blood to your skin, or do you want it to be diverted to your heart and brain? Diverted to the heart and brain. So how will I do this? I need to create a much higher resistance against the blood from coming into my skin.
Oh, okay.
So I will be closing here those two capillaries by constricting my precapillary sphincters. So you see on here, actually the true capillaries are branches coming out of my metarteriole, of my vascular shunt. If I want to increase the resistance against the blood to move it rather than into my skin, to move it away from my skin, I will be contracting here the precapillary sphincters, so the amount of blood that will be able to pass into this capillary bed will be markedly reduced. So if I have 10 streets that I can travel in, so I can allow 10 cars to travel in the same time. If I did reduce it to 1, so only 1 car can travel. And all the rest have to take another pathway. So here's the same concept. You're going to be conducting only one through the metarteriole, and all the blood that was supposed to go to your two capillaries is going to be directed away from this organ. Let's say this is a car accident, so my skin will be cold because I'm directing the blood away from my skin. So we've seen many vessels that will be directing my blood flow. What are those different vessels that we've seen that will be regulating the blood flow to the different organs? First type of vessels, first type of arteries that we've seen was responsible to contract and relax, and this allows more or less blood to travel to a certain organ. So what is because those arteries that will have much more muscles that allows you to regulate the diameter of those arteries, have much more muscles, so I will call them my vascular arteries. Alright? Easy? So you have vascular arteries for you to contract and to relax, to regulate the amount of blood that flows into your organs. Alright? Who will be providing you with the with most of the resistance? Again, is the blood flow. And we'll call them my resistance vessels. My arteries. My arteries. Alright? So you see on here. Can you remind me, what is cardiac output? What's cardiac output? This is the amount of blood pumped for each ventricle during 1 minute. During 1 minute. So what is your resting cardiac output? Can you remind me?
7.
It's about 5 liters per minute. So you're going to be pumping per 5 liters per minute from each of your lungs. So can you remind me, what's going to be the maximum cardiac output? What is the amount of blood that you get pumped during exercise? It's going to be 4 to 5 times the resting cardiac output. So you can pump 25, let's say. So what happens during exercise? You are not only increasing the cardiac output. So I'm not only increasing the amount of blood pumped from my heart, I am also redistributing this larger amount of blood. So who needs more blood flow when I exercise? My muscles. So you see on here, my muscles in rest, they are receiving, let's say, 1.5 liters. The amount of blood that I will be getting to my skeletal muscles during exercise is going to be 10 times the resting conditions. So I almost receive 13 liters of blood to my skeletal muscles per minute. Compared to something like your gastrointestinal tract. During rest, your abdomen, your abdominal organs, are going to be receiving around 1.5 liters. So almost the same amount like what your skeletal muscles are going to be receiving during rest. So see here, what's going to happen when you exercise? It decreases. Although I did increase the total amount of blood pumped from my heart, all the cardiac output has increased. But the amount of blood reaching my abdomen did drop. You see on here? I'm getting almost 1/3 of what I was getting in rest. Alright, you see here, I'm not only increasing the amount of blood that I'm pumping, I'm also redistributing this blood. And again, how do you redistribute the blood? By contracting your arteries. What arteries will allow you to regulate the amount of blood flow to certain organs? Muscular arteries. Muscular arteries. And what else will allow you to redirect the blood to more important organs? Your capillaries. You contract what in your capillaries? At the base of the true capillaries, what did I have to contract in here? What do we call those muscles? Capillary. So you're going to be regulating the amount of blood reaching each of the organs by regulating the amount of the blood traveling through the vascular arteries, the distribution vessels, and then you're going to be also regulating the amount traveling inside this organ by contracting or relaxing the precapillary sphincter. And this is what allows you to redistribute the blood. So not every organ will receive 5 times the amount of blood when you exercise. They will not be receiving the same ratio like during rest. You see here, my muscles did receive 10 times the amount of blood. My heart is receiving 3 times. My brain is receiving the same amount. My abdomen is receiving almost 1/3 of the amount it was getting during rest. So I did increase the total cardiac output by 5 times. 5 times the amount of blood I will be pumping during rest. But you see on here, not every single organ gonna receive 5 times the amount of blood of the resting condition. Some will even decrease, like your kidneys, like your abdominal organs. All right? Questions? So again, what are the major factors that will be regulating the blood flow to be distributed to the different organs? My arterioles, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Arterioles,
Yes.
very minimal. Muscular arteries,
Yes.
yes, very basic. Precapillary sphincters, yes, basic.
I just want to know what that line, the white line, is in between the skeletal muscle.
I'm not sure.
It was like saying it was, that's the extra amount that added to or not.
But it has been added, like
The skeletal muscle.
Whatever that was.
Well, there's like a break.
it's a break. Yeah, but I'm not sure what they meant by this. I'm not sure what the illustrator did mean by this. So might be, yeah, this is the amount, for example, that is equal to this amount. Maybe. So this is the amount of the cardiac output in rest, and all this amount has been added to the cardiac output. Maybe this is what they thought when they drew this illustration. I'm not sure. All right. Questions? All right. So moving on to the venous system. Venous system. So again, veins are carrying the blood from the capillaries to the heart, and I have a very low blood pressure compared to the arteries. I have a very low blood pressure compared to the arteries. Can you remind me which one did have a larger lumen, your arteries or your veins? If you go back to this diagram in here, that we did start this chapter with. Who did have a larger lumen?
Oh,
Veins.
Veins. Who did have less muscles, less elastic tissue in his wall? Your veins. So this tells you why you're going to have lower pressure. Why do I have lower pressure in my veins? I have more volume inside. I have more space inside. If you remember, what is the relationship between volume and pressure? When you increase volume, what happens to pressure?
Decreases.
Drops. And when you decrease volume, what happens to pressure? Increases. So if I'm telling you that I have a larger lumen in my veins, so this means I will have lower pressure. I have lower pressure in my veins compared to the arteries. Also, you see why here? Because the pressures that you're going to be getting from the ventricular contraction will be faced by a lot of resistance on its way to the veins. So in order to reach my veins, I did need to travel through the elastic arteries, muscular arteries, arterioles, and then capillary beds, and then out of the capillary beds to the venules. So all this distance I'm traveling applies more resistance on the blood flow. So what's going to happen to my pressure? It's going to be slowing down. I will slow down my blood flow, and this will result in a much lower pressure in your veins compared to your arteries, which they will directly receive the blood from your heart. Starting with the smallest type of veins, those are the venules, and they will be very porous. They have pores like the fenestrations, and they will allow fluid and white blood cells to move in and out of the bloodstream to the tissues. So they have a very similar structure to my capillaries. Also, they will allow some exchange to take place with the tissues. Looking here at the veins, I have a much thinner wall compared to the artery. I have a much larger lumen compared to the artery. And this will tell you why most of the blood gonna be kept in your veins. So if we're looking here at the veins, what percent of your blood circulating is going to be located in veins at any time. 60% of your blood volume is kept in your veins. What do you think? Why do you think I will keep most of the blood in my veins? 60% of the blood volume is going to be kept in my veins, not in my arteries, not in my heart, not in my capillaries. Have larger lumen, so I can accommodate much more blood. I don't have this recoil, I don't have this elasticity because I don't have much elastic connective tissue in the wall of my veins. I have a much lower pressure because the blood that travels through a lot of resistance in order to reach the veins. So I have much lower pressure, so the blood is not traveling so fast, so it's kept for longer time in my veins. I have a larger lumen. I have less elastic tissue. I have less muscles in the wall of my vein. That's why most of the blood in your circulation is going to be kept at any time in your veins. Almost 60% of the blood volume is kept in your veins. That's why the other names that we're going to be using for the veins, those are my capacitance vessels. This is where I have the largest capacity. This is where I keep the largest amount of blood. So compared to the ventricles of the heart, your heart only keeps 8% of the blood. Your lungs and the pulmonary vessels, those will keep 12% of your circulation, of your blood. The systemic arteries will keep 15%. The largest part of your blood is going to be kept in veins. And again, why? Thinner wall, less muscles, less elastic tissue, much lower pressure, and larger lumen.
How much is this in the other one?
Can I repeat, please?
I know you said 12%.
12% is the lungs and the pulmonary vessels. Lungs and pulmonary vessels. Pulmonary vessels include my pulmonary capillaries. Alright, so moving on to one of the most important topics this semester, and this would be the blood pressure. So we start here by checking the pressure in the aorta. At the time of cardiac contraction, when my ventricles are contracting, the blood pressure that will be recorded is going to be 120 millimeter mercury. And we call this as my systolic blood pressure. Systolic means during ventricular contraction. When my ventricle is going to be relaxing, the blood pressure that's going to be recorded is going to be 80 millimeter mercury on average. This is what we call the diastolic, exactly, diastolic blood pressure. So again, when I check the blood pressure in my arteries, large arteries, I would be 120 over 80 millimeter mercury. What this means? 120 means the blood pressure during ventricular contraction is equal to 120 millimeter mercury. So the blood pressure is the pressure created by 120 millimeters of mercury. So if you go up to the space and you've got 120 millimeters of mercury, they will apply the same pressure like your blood during ventricular contraction. The same concept. 80 millimeter mercury during ventricular relaxation, diastolic. All right? As I keep moving away from my heart, what's going to happen? I will have a drop. But where did I have most of the drop in my blood pressure? In what kind of vessels?
Arterials.
So where did I have a major drop in here? What do you think? So here in my aorta, let's say, did I have a major drop? It's almost the same throughout the aorta, almost the same. So you keep it, keep the systolic blood pressure 120, you keep the diastolic 8. Here in my large arteries, what's going to happen? The systolic drops from 120, let's say, to 100. So I have 20 millimeter mercury lost in my vascular arteries. during ventricular contraction, and all the diastolic pressure is going to be almost the same. But where did I have a major drop in here? You see, I dropped almost from 90 something, 95, let's say, all the way down to 30 millimeter mercury. Only in my arterioles, I did have a major drop of almost 60 to 70 millimeter mercury. Why did you have this major drop in your blood pressure? Because this is the type of vessels that applies the most of the resistance. Those are what we call resistance vessels. Alright? The higher the resistance you have on the blood flow, the blood will be reducing its force. And as you reduce the force of the blood flow, you're going to decrease its pressure that it applies on the wall of your vessel. This is what we call the blood pressure. As you keep moving to the capillaries, keeps dropping in your venules, in your veins, and it's gonna almost reach 0 millimeter mercury towards the vena cava, towards my superior and inferior vena cava. Almost, it's gonna be 0 millimeter mercury. Almost have no applied pressure. All right. So, arterial blood pressure, again, what is meant by systolic blood pressure? What is meant by systolic blood pressure? This is
Ventricular
the
contraction.
blood pressure during ventricular contraction. And again, what is meant by blood pressure? This is the pressure of what? Of the blood flow. So remember, in order to have a blood pressure, I need to have a blood flow. In order to have a blood pressure, I need to have a blood flow against a resistance. Any pressure means you've got flow against resistance. Flow against resistance. What is your flow in here that creates your blood pressure? It's going to be your cardiac output. This is the amount of blood that's going to be pumped per minute. This gives me an impression about the amount of blood that flows in my arteries. And what is the resistance here? The resistance is going to be your vessels, the diameter of your vessels. So again, what is blood pressure? This is the pressure of the blood flow applied on the wall of your arteries. When we discuss here systolic and diastolic blood pressure, we are looking at arterial pressure. Arterial pressure. Because if you look on here in your veins, do you have any difference between systolic and diastolic in your veins or in your capillaries?
No.
Do I have any difference? Do I have a difference between systolic and diastolic?
No.
No, I don't. This is almost the same. Whether my heart is contracting or relaxing, my veins will have the same pressure during the cardiac cycle. All right. So when I say systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, I mean by this pressure, it's the pressure of the blood on the wall of my arteries. I am looking at arterial blood pressure. Arterial blood pressure. So again, flow will be pushing the wall of my arteries. This is the pressure of the blood pressure. So where is the resistance? The resistance is the vessel itself. So if I have flow, blood pushes the vessel out. So if I want to check the blood pressure, what will I need to do? What do you think? If I told you that the blood pressure is the force by which the blood flow is pushing the wall of the arteries out. You try to close it. Exactly. So what we're going to be actually doing next time when we measure the blood pressure, we're going to be creating a pressure that compresses the artery until you close the blood flow. And once I close the blood flow, this means the pressure, the compression pressure I am creating from outside is equal to the pressure of the blood flow. So when you inflate the cup, what you're doing? You are compressing the vessel. And which pressure are you measuring? Are you passing something inside the artery to check its pressure?
No.
No, you are measuring the pressure inside the cup. But how would I know that the pressure inside the cup is equal to the pressure inside the artery? Once you block the flow. Once you block the flow, this means pressure outside is equal to the pressure inside and the vessel is collapsed. So again, what is my systolic blood pressure? This is an arterial pressure. So we're measuring the pressure of the blood flow in the arteries during ventricular contraction. And what do we mean by diastolic blood pressure? We're measuring the blood pressure during ventricular relaxation. Again, where? In my arteries. We don't have systolic and diastolic in the vein. We don't have systolic and diastolic in my capillaries. When we say systolic and diastolic, we mean it's an arterial pressure. Alright, so when you put your fingers on one of your arteries, check the pulse, what do you feel? What do I feel when I check the pulse? Do I feel the heartbeat?
Yes.
Do I feel the heartbeat?
Yes.
Like the vibration created by the cardiac contraction travels with my vessels, and I feel it down here.
Nope.
The blood pumping.
Recoil. So the recoil and the expansion, this takes place in the large arteries, the massive arteries, aorta and
So
space.
resistance on your artery.
On your blood things, on your vein.
Resistance on the artery.
On
Do
your
you
artery.
feel pressure?
Again,
Is this the pressure you mean?
you feel
The blood flow.
the flow.
Yeah, what's the pulse?
resistance?
When you feel, what do you feel actually is?
The blood pumping.
You're feeling the blood.
So what we feel is not the
You
same.
feel the turbulence.
No, it's not.
Isn't it
What
like
we hear, what do we hear?
The valve closing.
Valve closure. But what do we feel? Do we feel the valve closure?
No, you're feeling the blood
We
flow.
don't feel the valve closure at all.
The blood flow and the pressure.
But what do you think? What do you feel of the pulse? Blood pressure? We feel the blood pressure? So why sometimes I feel it and sometimes I won't?
If the pressure is not high enough, then you can't.
No, I mean, when you feel the pulse, is this blood pressure, right? But in 1 second, in another second, you won't have this pressure, you won't have this pulse. It's not continuous, right?
Contraction of the
So this
ventricle.
means that at one point I won't have any blood flow.
No.
No, the blood is flowing all the time, right? This is what we agreed on last time.
You're feeling the higher pressure with the lower pressure.
You're feeling the higher pressure, not the lower pressure. What do you think?
You feel
The backflow.
You're
It's
close.
the
you're so
backflow.
close. So what we feel as a pulse is difference exactly
Yeah, the difference.
between
Backflow.
the systolic and the diastolic. We don't feel just the regular pressure. We don't feel the pressure itself. We feel only the difference between the two pressures.
Change.
The change, exactly. So like when you speed up, you feel you're speeding up. And when you slow down, you feel that you're slowing down. If there is a change, you're gonna feel it. But if you are moving at a constant speed, would you feel that you are always dragged forward?
No.
No. You feel the change. And what change will take place in my arteries is gonna be
The difference.
the difference between the pressure during ventricular contraction and the pressure during ventricular relaxation. And the difference between those two pressures is gonna be my pulse pressure. My pulse pressure. So again, what is systolic pressure? This is the pressure of the blood flow on the wall of my arteries during ventricular contraction. Diastolic is the pressure of the blood flow on the wall of my artery during ventricular relaxation. What is the pulse pressure? This is the difference between those two pressures. So in my artery, sometimes I have 120 and sometimes I have 80. So the pulse pressure is equal to, what I feel is equal to the difference, 40 millimeter mercury. This is what you feel. You don't feel the 120, you don't feel the 40, and you don't feel the 80 millimeter mercury. You only feel the difference between the two. All right? So for example, if I have what we call hyperdynamic flow. Hyperdynamic, for example, if I have anemia. So I'm contracting so fast to keep circulating those this limited number of red blood cells. So what's going to happen? Boom, boom, collapse, boom, collapse. So what's going to happen? I have a major difference between systolic and diastolic, and as a result, I will feel my arteries are nodding, and my head might be nodding even from this hyperdynamic flow. If you're running, sometimes you're going to feel that as if your vessels are pushed out. Why? Because you have a hyperdynamic flow. You have a major difference between systolic and diastolic because of the increased heart rate. All right? Questions? No?
A little later. Oh, God, I asked now. Why mercury? I don't really want to ask that.
Why mercury?
Why mercury? Is it because of the weight?
I have no clue. So I believe we've learned something like this back in middle school. Once I did use mercury, but I don't remember. To measure the pressure. There was an experiment in middle school that I've had, but I don't remember exactly.
Don't they put the mercury in the thermometers?
Yeah, but I don't remember. I don't remember exactly how they did create this unit. I don't remember. But let me check this out. But I'm not exactly sure how did they get this measure. Right? But this is the unit of measurement that is going to be used. That we're going to be using for pressure, millimeter mercury. All right. So if we are studying a medication, let's say, and I want to check the effect of this medication on the blood pressure, which pressure do you think I should be considering in my study? Systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, or the pulse pressure? So,
Systolic.
Diastolic. Pulse pressure gives me an impression about both. Actually, none of them we're going to be using. We're going to be using mean arterial pressure. Right?
Hey, that wasn't a choice. You didn't make that one a choice.
Is this what our question be like? Just to cross out all the answers.
All right, so mean pressure. Mean means average. So this is the average arterial pressure, mean arterial pressure. And we're going to calculate the mean arterial pressure by checking the diastolic pressure, and we're going to add 1/3 of the pulse pressure. So if I'm dealing with a person who has a systolic pressure of 120 and the diastolic pressure of 80 millimeter mercury, can you calculate this mean arterial pressure for me? So 80 plus 1/3 of 40. So this gives you so it's about 93 millimeter mercury. Alright, this again is the average pressure. It's gives me an impression, a general impression about the changes that might be taking place in the blood pressure. So when we consider anything dealing with blood pressure, we should be checking not only diastolic, not only systolic, and not only the difference between the diastolic and systolic. I need to get an impression about everything altogether. So we're going to be considering mean arterial pressure. That is the average pressure. And again, how we calculate the mean arterial pressure? Diastolic plus 1/3 of my pulse pressure. All right, so if you see on here, the capillaries, they did have much lower resistance, a much lower blood pressure compared to the arteries. Why? Because you see on here, in order to reach the capillaries, I did need to pass through the arterioles, which are applying a lot of resistance. So why do you think I will have this low blood pressure in my capillaries? Don't you want to have a higher pressure in your capillaries to allow better exchange, to move things out and in faster? Why do I keep this low pressure? Why didn't reduce the pressure to get enough blood to circulate in my organs to allow more exchange and better exchange? Why do you think?
Because isn't it like in the capillaries there's less muscle, so if you have all that blood.
Do we have any muscles in the capillary? Oh, I did erase them. I'm only fold up one row of flat cells.
Right.
That's it.
There's no muscle, so if there's too much blood going.
So if too much blood, too high resistance, what do you think?
It's in the capillaries, in the pressure. It's because the pressure is low.
Rupture, exactly. If I did have a higher pressure in my capillaries, those capillaries will rupture. But why? Why I don't have a higher capillary? Why I don't have a stronger capillary? Because I don't need. They are permeable. They are already allowing what I need to pass to the organs. So my continuous capillaries will allow the solids, will allow the fluids to travel to the skin, brain, and muscles. My fenestrate capillaries will allow the transport and the exchange to take place with the kidney, with my endocrine glands, with my intestines. My sinusoidal capillaries will allow the exchange between my bone marrow, my spleen, my liver. So I have the type of capillaries that will allow the amount of permeability that I need for this specific organ. I don't need a higher pressure to facilitate the exchange. I have enough permeability in my organs. I don't need to increase it. I am already permeable to the fluids, to the molecules, to the cells, according to the place where I'm located. Question?
Is that why you check the capillary refill in your digits?
This gives you an impression about the pressure itself, the blood pressure itself. So, because if I did have low pressure on here, low pressure in here, the blood travels at a slower rate to my capillaries. All right. We'll also check for anemias through the capillary, through the nail beds. So we'll check the color of the blood through the nail beds, for example. All right.
Question. So one thing about the right, you know they did the vital or whatever. So she said my blood pressure was high. I was very stressed out that morning, but we were very stressed out. So she like went away and she came back, and it was still high, but it went down, but it was still high. So like.
So it's high because you were frustrated, or before you get frustrated it was high?
Like how do I like? Because I know
Because the blood
I.
pressure will be affected by your emotion.
Oh no, I'm asking like, but because my grandmother said that it's because I eat poorly. Also, I ate a lot of sodium. So.
Yeah, so blood pressure will be high in many circumstances. It might be something temporary. So that's why you cannot say a person is hypertensive unless you check his blood pressure in different times of the day, in different circumstances. Because if you left your patient in the emergency room waiting for 2 hours, he will get nervous, he will get adrenaline, he will constrict his arteries,
and you're gonna get a high blood pressure reading. You don't diagnose hypertension just from one reading. It has to be persistent, checked in different situations and in different times of the day. To say that I have hypertension. Of course, taking too much salts, having increased body mass index, having what else, for example?
Caffeine.
Having family predisposition. So I had my family has hypertension. Like my parents have hypertension, so I'm more likely to have hypertension. All right, living a stressful life. You are releasing always cortisol, you're releasing adrenaline all the time. All this will increase your blood pressure. So many factors other than just salt. All right, so again, why I don't have high pressure of blood in my capillaries, simply because I don't need. If I did have an increase in the blood pressure in my capillaries, they will simply rupture. So, moving on to the veins. What do you think? Do you have a high or low blood pressure in your veins? Higher or lower than the capillaries? Much. See on here. What happens in your veins? Veins will have much lower pressure compared to your capillaries. So, if I am conducting the blood down to my foot, how will this blood get back to my systemic circulation? How this blood will move back to my right atrium? Can you remind me what is the vein that drains everything below the diaphragm? Inferior vena cava. But how will it move all this way from my toes up to my right atrium?
Isn't that from like the blood?
Again, it's the gravity. And I have that low pressure. Do you have another pump? Do you have another heart down in your legs?
No.
Pumping the blood up? What do you think?
Low to high pressure.
Suction? You see, I have a very poor negative pressure that can be created in my atria. Did you see how delicate is the wall of your atria compared to the ventricles when we did the dissection last time? So it cannot be effective. It cannot create an effective suction pressure to pull this blood up from your legs to your right atrium. What do you think? And it cannot be the push from the heart itself. So you see on here, the push of the heart, it did start at 120 millimeter mercury. This is the force of the blood flow. And now it drops almost to 10 millimeter mercury. It drops even below this when it gets to the vena cava.
But then you already said the veins are the capacity.
Yes.
Capacity.
Yeah, they are the capacity of vessels.
Still there, but
So,
still moving.
And because of this very low blood pressure, they are the capacity of vessels. They contain large amounts of blood. But my question is different. How am I moving the blood back to the heart if I don't have enough pressure? And again, what is pressure? What's pressure? This is flow against resistance. So if I want the blood to flow, it needs to have pressure. Vasoconstriction, yes. Vasoconstriction. So you're going to need to stimulate the veins for them to contract under the effect of the sympathetic nervous system. Yes, sympathetic nervous system going to be allowing venoconstriction. I will be constricting the veins. And as I constrict the veins, what's going to happen? You reduce the volume of your veins. And as you decrease the volume, what happens to the pressure? It increases, and as you increase pressure, blood is going to be able to move. But it's not enough by itself. What do you think? What else? So venoconstriction, yes. sympathetic nervous system will stimulate your veins, pushing this blood up.
Muscular.
Muscles. How?
I guess a contraction of your muscles still apply pressure.
When you move, what's going to happen? You are contracting your leg muscles, and your veins are actually traveling between your leg muscles. So what happens when you contract your muscles? They will be squeezing the veins.
Creating pressure.
Your leg veins. So if I look here, this is one of my veins, and this is my muscles surrounding this leg vein. So once they contract, I have shortening, and I will bulge at this side. Bulge in this side. So what happens to the vein in between the muscles? It gets squeezed. But why the blood will decide? So, and once it gets squeezed, what's going to happen to the volume inside this vein? Decreases. And once it decreases, what's going to happen to its pressure? Increases. And once it increases, it will try to move to a side with lower pressure. So here I have high pressure. I will try to go to a lower pressure. So where will I go? Up or down? Up and down.
I was gonna say it'll shit go both ways.
Alright, so because simply you're gonna need to travel to a side with lower resistance. But why I don't want the blood to go down? Because I need it to move only up to my heart. So how do I prevent the blood from going down? Valves. Exactly. That's why veins have valves. So you're going to be increasing the pressure in your veins. And as you increase the pressure in your veins, this pressure is going to be moving the blood either up or down. But what will prevent this blood from flowing down is the presence of valves. So the only path for this blood is to move up back to your heart. This is what we call the muscular pump. Another pump which will play a major role here in getting the blood back to the heart.
Respiratory.
How?
Go home, skeleton. You're drunk.
My friends, I'm sorry.
He's drunk.
Here you go. Alright, so in the chest, what do we have inside the chest? Lungs and heart. And can you remind me what membrane is going to be surrounding my lungs? Do you remember the name of the serous membrane that surrounds the heart? Is that lungs? Pleural. I remember any serous membrane will have one layer that covers the organ, and this is what we're going to call the serous membrane, the visceral layer of the serous membrane. And the other layers is going to be lining the cavity from inside, and this is what we call the parietal layer. So like any serous membrane, they have a visceral layer covering the organ from outside, and a parietal layer that's going to be lining my cavity from inside. And those two layers of the membrane going to be attached together. So an outer membrane is covered, is going to be attached to the chest wall. It's lining the chest wall from inside. And the other membrane is going to be covering my lungs from outside. So what is the tendency of your lungs? To expand or to recoil? What do you think?
Recoil.
Recoil?
Both.
We got you this time.
It's not a trick this time, all right?
No.
So, all right, if I have a balloon, all right, and does it have tendency to keep inflating itself?
No.
No.
Or will it have tendency to recoil, to collapse? It will have tendency to collapse or recoil. Same for your lungs. So your lungs always are trying to collapse. Your lungs are like a balloon, and the balloon is always trying to collapse. So my lungs are always trying to collapse. How about my muscles? My muscles are always trying to contract. All right? You see on here, if my muscles are always trying to contract, what do we have between the ribs? We have what muscles? Do you remember? Intercostal muscles. And those muscles have tendency to contract. So what is the tendency of my chest? To move away or to move out or in? So if I'm contracting my muscles, I'm elevating the ribs, and if I'm elevating the ribs, my chest is going out. So again, what is the tendency of your lungs? Your lungs have tendency to collapse. And my chest wall has a tendency to expand. All right, so if I'm breathing, as I keep inflating the balloon, what happens to the tendency it has? So, will the tendency for it to recoil increases or decreases? Again. If I keep increasing the flow of air in a balloon, will it has a stronger tendency to collapse or a stronger tendency or less tendency to collapse? So, will it collapse at a faster rate or at a slower rate? Let me faster rate. So, if it collapses at a faster rate, so this means it has a higher or lower tendency to collapse? Higher. So if I'm breathing, I am increasing. If I get air from outside, my lungs' tendency to collapse will increase. All right? Keep all this information in the back of your mind. We're gonna put all those together in a second. Okay. So, what we mentioned so far, we have a membrane that covers my lungs. And this membrane has two layers. One is going to be covering the lung tissue from outside, and the other layer is lining the chest cavity from inside. The chest wall has tendency to expand. And my lungs have tendency to collapse. So what do you think happens to the pressure between the two layers of the pleura?
Pressure increase.
So again. My chest wall has tendency to move out. My lungs have tendency to recoil, collapse, move in. So am I moving the two layers of the pleura away or towards each other? Away from each other, right? And as I breathe, the tendency of my lungs to collapse will increase. As I breathe in, what happens to the tendency of the two layers to move away from each other? It will increase. So if I have here, those are the two layers of my pleura. Can you put your hand like this? So I have two layers, and they are moving close to each other. So what's going to happen? What do you feel? Did you feel something? Air. So you feel air. Why did you feel air? Because as I move them close to each other, I am reducing the volume, and as I reduce the volume, what happens to the pressure of air between the two layers? Increases, and as the pressure the pressure of the air between the two layers increases, it's gonna flow from high pressure to low pressure, so you can feel it. All right, thank you. All right, so exactly the opposite to this. What's gonna happen between the two layers of the fluid? So rather than getting them closer to each other, I am moving them away. And if I'm moving them away, what happens to the volume? Increases. And as a result, what happens to the pressure? Decreases. But because it's closed, it's not connected to the outside, so you cannot get any air to flow in between the two layers of the pleura. It's not connected to the outside. So if I'm trying all the time to move my two layers of the pleura away from each other, what's going to happen to the pressure in between the two layers? If it's not connected to the outside, you cannot reduce this negative pressure. So I always have a pressure lower than the pressure of the atmosphere. Why again I have a pressure lower than the pressure of the atmosphere? Because those two layers are trying all the time to move away from each other. And once I try to move away from each other, I am creating a vacuum. Because it's not connected to the outside. You cannot allow air to flow. And if you allow air, if a person got stabbed in his chest, would you remove the knife?
No.
Why?
You allow air into.
Because simply, if you did remove the knife, you are telling the air, yeah, you can go to this low pressure
Collapse lung.
and collapse the lung. Now you know.
So you just supposed to let the person just stick it in the knife?
No.
If you take it out,
Yeah,
there's
if you
more
take it
risk
out,
of
his lungs
injury.
will collapse. You need to get him to the emergency for
With the knife.
that. Yes.
Stabilize the
For
knife.
the hospital to connect his pleural cavity to that.
Leave it there.
Because taking it out can
Negative
cause more
pressure.
damage than
And go,
I mean, if it's like on a
you're
heartbeat,
gonna wait
you pull it
until
out,
you're
leave it
gonna
there.
wait until you connect it to a negative pressure. Because if you didn't allow any air to flow between the two layers of the pleura, the lungs will collapse. There is nothing that pulls the lung. Your lungs is like a balloon. How your lungs are kept inflated due to this suction pressure created on the outside.
Is there any, so what if, like, is there any way to, like, say, without
After you
taking
take
it
it
out?
out, why did you take it out? Why did you do that?
You're not a licensed medical professional?
Yes, you need to create a vacuum. So if you watch the doctor, this was the first episode of season 1.
I need to watch that show.
What's up?
Still on season 10 of Grey's Anatomy.
Really?
I'm gonna watch season 10.
I don't like Grey's Anatomy.
I love Grey's Anatomy.
It's not about medicine.
It's like the only one that didn't rock.
It's both.
Alright, actually my favorite is House.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's a medical show too?
Yeah, it's an old.
So back.
Yeah, I didn't watch House either.
Chest. Alright,
I
so
watch
why
every-
did we
I watch
mention
every
all
other
this?
one.
Because this negative pressure is gonna be located in your chest. So this negative pressure is a suction pressure. So what am I pulling in here in my chest? I'm pulling everything. And one of the things that's going to be located in your chest is going to be your heart. So if I'm pulling, I'm creating a negative pressure. Who's going to be pulled up into to the chest is going to be your venous blood. So the venous blood is going to be moving up due to the suction pressure created by your chest. And we call this as my respiratory pump. What is a respiratory pump again? This is the negative pressure that we're going to be creating every time we're going to be breathing into the chest. Again, why did I have this negative pressure? Because simply when you breathe in during aspiration, what's going to happen? You increase the tendency of the lungs to recoil. And as I increase the tendency of the lungs to recoil, I increase this negative pressure. And as I increase this negative pressure, it's going to be pulling the blood up to the chest. Respiratory pump. So what do you think? A 70 years old male found his daughter, found him falling on the floor in the restroom early in the morning, and she take him to the hospital. What happened was
Most likely a stroke.
70 years, so the information that you're gonna have, so he lost consciousness in the restroom. So you have the two keys here that we have is gonna be that he's old and he fell in the restroom. Why do you think? He lost consciousness. He don't have diabetes, he don't have hypertension.
He hit his head.
Right? He doesn't, so it's not about insulin and sugar level.
You said it was
It's
in the
about what we're
morning?
saying here.
You said it was in the morning?
What's that?
In the morning?
In the morning, yes.
Like right after wakes up?
Yeah, after he wakes up, he went to the restroom and he didn't come out. So his daughter opened the restroom, checked him out, she found him lying on the floor after losing consciousness.
Within an hour.
Take the ABCs.
This is the chest area. How?
Airway, breathing, circulation. Core circulation.
So with this suction pressure you create in the chest is gonna be higher than the contraction of the heart itself? No. So the ventricles will be
It's gonna be
pushing
from
the blood
muscle.
up to the brain normally.
The muscle pump.
Is he breathing?
What do you think?
So when you sleep,
It's either going to be a heart attack or a stroke.
low blood pressure, and then when
But
you
he
wake
did
up,
wake up already.
you wake up and then.
Went to the restroom. Not directly after he stands up. So while he's in the restroom. Yeah, this might happen, yes. When a person stands up,
They get
blood is gonna be pulled by the effect of gravity. So I might
It gets
feel-
dizzy.
Yeah, dizzy.
Stroke or heart attack.
Less severe.
Was he on the toilet?
Yeah.
So was he basal? Basal.
So what happened in here? What happened in here? So he went to the restroom. He was pushing down.
He passed out. He basal.
So what happened here? So what he's doing, Valsalva maneuver here. Valsalva is getting air in your lungs, and you're contracting the muscles. So you are reducing the size of the chest. You're reducing the size of the chest. Pulling in. So I'm moving the chest in. And I am filling the lungs with air. And I did close my vocal cords. So when you push in, what you're doing, you're contracting your diaphragm. Your diaphragm is moving up. And you have air trapped inside your lungs. So you're not allowing the lungs to collapse. You're not allowing the lungs to reduce their size. So what happens? I am filling the lungs, so I'm moving the lungs, or this layer of the pleura, out. And I am moving my chest in. So what happens between the two layers now? I am getting them closer or away from each other. Closer to each other.
Cutting off
And this is
blood
an
flow.
old guy, so
Cutting off blood flow.
when you have weak or strong muscles, weaker muscles. So he's pushing down, he has weak muscles, he lost his muscular pump, his respiratory pump, so no enough venous return, no enough blood that comes back to the right atrium. And if I'm not getting blood back, can I pump blood out? If you didn't receive blood, can you pump blood?
No. You don't have anything to
So drop in venous return, so this will directly affect the amount of blood that you're pumping out. So less blood will go to the brain. This guy will lose consciousness. All right?
Sounds about right.
So again, what are the three factors here that we've mentioned that would be increasing the venous return against the blood, against the
Vascular pump,
Gravity.
respiratory.
muscular pump contraction? You're going to be squeezing the veins, and as you squeeze the veins, you're creating a higher pressure within your veins. What prevents you from going back down?
Valves.
Presence of valves. Second is going to be your respiratory pump. And again, how the respiratory system will work as a pump for the blood to pull the blood up to the lung, to the heart, by moving the two layers of the pleura away from each other. Your chest has tendency to expand, your lungs have tendency to recoil. An increased tendency of the lungs to recoil when you breathe in. So that's why. What's going to happen, do you think, to your heart sounds when you breathe in? What do you think? When I breathe in, and I'm auscultating the chest of my patient, when he's breathing in. All right, so what's going to happen to the sound of the closure of the valves? If I'm moving more blood, what do you think? It's going to be louder. It's going to close faster and louder. Because you did pull lots of blood moving down to the ventricle, creating a high pressure within the ventricle, so the first heart sound would be stronger. All right? Questions? All right. So the third factor is the constriction of the veins. This is regulated by your sympathetic nervous system. All right. So where is blood pressure highest? Where do I have the highest blood pressure? When capillaries, elastic arteries, veins, arterioles. B, C, D, A, D, arterioles.
D for
D.
300.
Arterioles. Do I have the highest pressure in D? Yes. All of you agree?
No.
All right. Who doesn't?
I know they are.
Any other choices other than D?
Elastic artery.
It could be B.
I say B.
B, elastic
I'm
arteries.
gonna say B.
Elastic arteries. What do you think?
I changed my answer.
I'm sticking my
Yes.
I'm the same.
Yes.
B.
All right. So elastic arteries is a good choice.
Oh man. Extra credit.
Alright, so let's check on here. Let me check this diagram another time again. So where do you have the elastic arteries? Elastic arteries are your largest arteries, which are your aorta and its major branches. Do I have a high or low pressure in here compared to the arterioles?
Higher.
Higher pressure. So where do you have the highest blood pressure? In your
Arteries.
aorta and its main branches. So those are your elastic arteries. I didn't mention, so I believe most of you got confused in this one because you believe I was asking about resistance. So the one with highest resistance is going to be arterioles. The one that will be with highest pressure, elastic arteries, aorta and its major branches. So there is a difference between pressure and resistance. Pressure is both together, flow and resistance. Flow against resistance will create the pressure. If I have a lot of resistance but very slow blood, I will have a much lower pressure in my arterioles. Yes, I have much higher resistance in my arterioles, but why I don't have a higher pressure in my arterioles? Because simply as you move away from the heart, the blood will slow down. As I keep moving away from the heart, blood will slow down. Yes, you have a high resistance, but this will not mean that you're gonna have a higher pressure. So again, where do I have highest blood pressure? In my elastic department. Elastic. Alright, we can have a break for 10. We come back and discuss more stuff. My mean arterial pressure, this is gonna be the amount of blood pumped in 1 minute, cardiac output, and the peripheral resistance. And this peripheral resistance is gonna be mainly determined by the radius or the diameter of your vessel. The smaller the diameter, the higher the resistance I have to overcome to move the blood. If you want to reduce the blood pressure, what you're going to need to do for the vessels, do you need to constrict or dilate the vessel? What do you think? Dilate the vessel. Because as I have a larger diameter, I have less resistance against my blood flow. And as I reduce resistance, if I have 5 times 2 is equal 10 to 10. If I did reduce this resistance from 2 to 1, so now I have a drop in my blood pressure, my mean arterial pressure. So 5 times 2 is 10. When you reduce this 2 to 1, it's going to be 5. So if I want to reduce my blood pressure, I will need to decrease the resistance of the vessels. A third factor here that will contribute in your mean arterial pressure is going to be your blood volume. Blood volume.
What is the little arm?
This is the radius of the vessel. So actually it's radius power 4. I have a major effect here on the blood pressure. Alright, you don't need to know the details, just know that a larger diameter means less resistance compared to a smaller diameter means higher resistance. And this makes sense. If I'm trying to travel through a narrow vessel, I am applying a much higher resistance, and as a result, I will get a higher pressure. If I'm traveling through a larger diameter, I have less resistance, less blood pressure. Alright? So again, 3 contributing factors that will affect my blood pressure. Those are the amount of blood that you're going to be pumping per 1 minute, the resistance applied by your vessels, and the amount of blood circulating in your vessels. Blood volume, it makes sense. So if you have 1 liter of water that you put on this table and 10 liters of water, which one will apply more pressure, 1 liter or 10 liters of water? 10 liters of water. So the higher the blood volume, the higher its pressure. So you're going to see here, everything that will be regulating your blood pressure is either affecting your cardiac output, or your resistance, or it's going to be affecting your blood volume. So for example, one of the treatments of hypertension is to give diuretics. What are the diuretics for? Water pills. So you get rid of the water. And as I lose water out in the urine, what's going to happen to my blood volume? It's going to decrease. And as you reduce the blood volume, what happens to your blood pressure? Reduce. So again, 3 factors: cardiac output, peripheral resistance, your blood volume. All this will affect your mean arterial pressure. Again, what's mean arterial pressure? This is the average blood pressure in my arteries. How would I regulate this mean arterial pressure? How would I keep blood pressure within the normal ranges? But before we regulate the blood pressure, why do you need in the first place to have blood pressure? Why? Why do you have blood pressure?
To circulate the blood. To circulate the blood.
To keep the blood moving. Not
vessel, so you need a high blood pressure in order to develop fluid with it. So
Through what?
vessel.
Vessels? All the way inside the tissue, right? So I need to have enough pressure for me to push the blood all the way in the capillary bed of those organs. Because if I did reach the organ, but I didn't get into the capillaries inside the capillary bed, would I be able to perform this exchange that I want? Would I be able to deliver the oxygen? Would I be able to remove the carbon dioxide? No. So why do you need to maintain a normal blood pressure to not drop below normal for you to be able to maintain what we call tissue perfusion? I need the blood to be delivered to the capillary bed for me to be able to perform the exchange. If my blood pressure goes below normal, a drop in my blood pressure will directly affect the function of my organs. Because if I have less pressure, less force of the blood movement, what's going to happen? I'm not able to overcome the resistance inside my organs. And I won't have enough tissue perfusion. So you are willing to regulate your mean arterial pressure to maintain a normal tissue perfusion. So, how do I maintain a mean arterial pressure? How do I regulate the blood pressure in my arteries? First, I need to detect that there is a change. I need to know whether I have a decrease or an increase in my blood pressure for me to be able to respond to this change. So how can I detect change in my blood pressure, whether up or down? I have two kinds of receptors. I have chemoreceptors and baroreceptors. Baroreceptors, I am detecting stretch. So if I have an increased stretch of my aortic arch, let's say, I have more stretch than normal. So this tells you what? This tells you you have a high or low pressure?
High.
High pressure. What if I have reduced stretch detected here? I have less stretch in my arteries. So this means I have a high or low pressure? Low pressure. So baroreceptors are detecting the degree of stretch. And if I have more stretch, this means I have high blood pressure. And those are going to be located in your large arteries, like the aorta and carotid sinus. So you see on here, baroreceptors are detecting degree of stretch. More stretch means higher pressure. So what you're going to need to do? To dilate or to constrict? According to what we mentioned. So you're going to send the signal to the brain. I've got more stretch than what I used to have. So this means I have higher blood pressure. So you need to respond. How do you think your brain will respond? Will I need to increase or decrease the resistance? Again, my question. I did detect increased stretch by the baroreceptors. So the baroreceptors located in my large arteries gonna be sending up to the brain. We've got increased stretch. This means we have high blood pressure.
Decreases.
You need to respond. So how do you think your brain will respond?
Decreases.
Will it dilate the vessel or will it constrict the vessel?
Dilated.
dilate the vessels. So I have high blood pressure detected here, and my response gonna be to dilate my arteries. And why do you dilate the arterioles? Because the arterioles are gonna be representing the highest resistance. So if I have increased pressure, you want to decrease resistance or reduce the resistance?
Reduce.
I want to reduce resistance because mean arterial pressure equals to cardiac output times peripheral resistance. So how will I respond here? I will dilate my vessels. Vasodilation. So again, let's do numbers here because it seems that you're not complex. I'm pumping 5 liters of blood. This is my cardiac output. Times my resistance. Let's say 4. So what is my blood pressure? 20. If this 20 is supposed to be 10, would you like to increase this one or reduce it? Reduce. I want to reduce it. So I will reduce the resistance here to 2. So how do you reduce the resistance of a vessel? Do you think you will constrict it? Will you have more resistance in a narrow vessel or high or lower resistance in your large vessels? Which one will apply more resistance against the flow? This one, small one, or large one? Will have more resistance. Small one. So you see on here, if I want to drop resistance, what do you need to do for the vessel? You need to dilate. So I will detect increased stretch by the baroreceptors, will send the signal to the brain. The brain will respond by performing vasodilation. I will dilate the vessels, and as I dilate the vessel, what happens is the resistance drops. And as I drop the resistance, what's going to happen to my blood pressure? It's going to be reduced back to normal. So when I say increase blood pressure, reduce blood pressure, I'm increasing or reducing the blood pressure to get back to my normal blood pressure. Whenever I respond here, I'm trying to get the blood pressure back to the normal range. So here I started with having higher blood pressure. And now I will end up having a reduction in this high blood pressure back to normal. What if I did detect less stretch? This means what? I have high or low pressure? Low blood pressure. And as I have low blood pressure, what do you need to do? Do you need to increase it or reduce it? I need to increase my blood pressure. And how do I increase the blood pressure? By applying more or less resistance? More resistance. And how do I apply more resistance? By constriction or dilation? Constriction. So if I want to increase this blood pressure back to normal, what I need to do, the brain will send signals here to the sympathetic nervous system for the vessels to constrict. Arterioles. And as you increase the resistance facing the blood pressure, you're going to get a higher blood pressure, moving the blood pressure back to normal. It's the same concept. If you have a hose and you are watering your backyard, but the water is not reaching all the way to the back. So what you're going to be doing?
Squeeze the hose.
Squeezing the end of the hose. And when you squeeze the end of the hose, the water will travel further. What happened in here? I am reducing the diameter, applying more resistance. And as I apply more resistance, what's going to happen to the pressure? Increases. So the pressure of the water flow will increase, moving the water forward, further. Same concept on here. When you constrict the vessel, you're going to be pushing the blood forward at a higher speed, increasing its pressure. All right? Another another set of receptors. Those are my chemoreceptors. And from the name, what are those receptors detecting? If I'm called chemoreceptors, I am detecting
Chemicals.
chemical change in my blood. So if I told you I have increase in the carbon dioxide level in my blood, or I have a reduction in my pH, this means I have more acids. What this means for you? This means you have a high or low pressure. What do you think? Increased carbon dioxide level in your blood, reduction in the blood pressure, blood pH, or in other words, you're accumulating acids. What do you think? Do you think I have a high blood pressure or a low blood pressure?
Low.
Why did you have blood pressure? Can you remind me?
To keep the blood mixture.
You have
Tissue perfusion.
tissue perfusion. And why do you need to have tissue perfusion? To allow exchange. Having a high carbon dioxide, this means you've had enough exchange or not?
No.
Did I have enough exchange if I have an increased carbon dioxide level?
No.
No. This means I'm not able to get rid of the carbon dioxide. If I have an increase in the carbon dioxide levels, this means I didn't have enough tissue perfusion to allow me to get rid of this carbon dioxide. This means I have low or high pressure? Low blood pressure. Because low blood pressure will result in low tissue perfusion. And if I have low tissue perfusion, I am not able to perform the exchange. And if I'm not able to perform exchange, I will be accumulating acids. I will be accumulating carbon dioxide. So having an increase in the carbon dioxide level in your blood, having an increase in the amount of acids that you are accumulating, you're not getting rid of those acids in your kidney. This means you didn't have enough tissue perfusion. And if you don't have enough tissue perfusion, this means you have high or low pressure? Low pressure. I'm not able to push the blood into my organs. So, how do you need to respond, do you think? If I am detecting high carbon dioxide level, high acids, this means I have low blood pressure. So how do you think I will respond? Constriction or dilation of my arterioles.
Constriction.
I will need to constrict my arterioles. And as I constrict the arterioles, what's going to happen to my blood pressure?
It's gonna increase.
Go.
It will increase. And as you increase blood pressure, you're going to gain tissue perfusion, getting rid of the acids, getting rid of the carbon dioxide. Questions? All right. It's going to get complicated, so please stay with me. All right, we need to get every part on its own because it's going to get complicated in a second. All right, so again, in order for me to increase blood pressure, I did need to constrict my vessels, vasoconstriction. What vessels are you affecting? You are affecting arterioles, also arterioles, to increase the average pressure in your arteries, mean arterial pressure. What else? What else will give you an idea about your blood pressure? What else? A low in oxygen, for example. If I have low oxygen, this means I am not performing enough exchange with the blood. This means I have low blood pressure. Is there any other regulation of the blood pressures that I can perform other than dilating and constricting my blood vessels? Yes. You won't only send signals to the brain for it to constrict and dilate your vessels, you're also going to be triggering the activity of some hormones. So there will be a hormonal regulation. Like what hormones would be affecting your blood pressure? Like the epinephrine and norepinephrine. that will be released in case of fight or flight from your adrenal medulla. If you remember, we did have a pyramidal shaped gland above the kidney. We call it adrenal gland or suprarenal gland. And remember, one set of hormones that are gonna be released under the effect of the sympathetic nervous system was my epinephrine and norepinephrine. And this will enhance the sympathetic activity. Remember, if you find an alligator in your backyard, you need to have a higher blood pressure, you need to contract your heart at a faster rate, you need to increase your blood sugar level. All this was stimulated by the hormones that you're going to be releasing from the adrenal medulla. Why I don't rely only on electrical signals to those organs? Because I need a prolonged effect. That's why I did release those hormones, epinephrine and norepinephrine. So what are the effects of the epinephrine and norepinephrine on your vessels? Your vessels, in response to the epinephrine and norepinephrine, will constrict. So if I'm constricting the vessels, what will be the effect here on my blood pressure? Will I go up or down? Up. So epinephrine and norepinephrine will increase your blood pressure by performing vasoconstriction. Another hormone here is called angiotensin II. And we're going to be studying angiotensin II in our next meeting when we start our discussion in the kidney. Our angiotensin II, from its name, I am called angio. Angio is vessel. And tensin means I'm applying tension. So what do you think is going to be one of the main effects of a hormone called angiotensin? To apply tension to your vessels. So when I apply tension to my vessels, this means I am performing constriction or dilation. Constriction. And if you constrict your vessels, what's going to be the effect of angiotensin II on your blood pressure? If you're constricting the vessel, you're increasing the resistance. And as you increase resistance, what happens to the pressure? It goes up. If I increase resistance, pressure goes up. All right? Any problems? All right. Another hormone that we're looking at here is called ADH, anti-diuretic hormone. Anti-diuretic hormone. What do you think is the main action of this hormone? I'm called anti. Anti means I prevent. And diuretic means water loss in urine. So this is a hormone that prevents water loss in urine. And if I'm preventing water loss in urine, what's going to happen to my blood volume? Increases. If you're not losing water out in the urine, you're gaining blood volume. And if you increase the volume of your blood, what's going to happen to its pressure? If I increase the amount of blood that I have, its pressure will increase. So ADH will be preventing the loss of water in urine, increasing the blood volume, and this will increase my blood pressure. And this is actually a way by which we're going to be treating hypertension, to enhance the release of water in urine, to reduce the blood pressure. Another hormone here that we're looking at is called atrial natriuretic peptide. We're going to discuss all the different functions of those hormones in the next chapter. We didn't mention details about each one of them. We are just looking at the general function. So what can you understand here from the name of a hormone called atrial natriuretic peptides? Atrial means I am related to heart. Atrium, the atrium of the heart. So this is actually, as we're going to be discussing, is going to be released from your atrium. And uretic. What's uresis? Uresis means loss in urine. So diuresis in urine. Here, I'm looking at natriuretic. So what am I losing in urine in here? Natriuretic. So what is C? Is the atomic symbol of carbon. What's O? H. Hg.
Losing salt. Losing salt.
Helium. Na. Sodium. So why it's not SO? Because we don't give the atomic symbol according to the English name. We give it according to the Latin name. So in Latin, sodium is called natrium. 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 So what I'm losing in urine in here, I'm losing sodium. So this is a hormone that will be releasing sodium in urine. Natriuretic. If I'm losing sodium out, if I'm losing solutes, what will follow the solute? By osmosis, water follows.
Water.
And as I lose water out in the urine, if I'm losing sodium in the urine, water will follow the sodium out. If I'm losing water out in the urine, what's going to happen to my blood volume?
Increases.
Decreases. And as you decrease volume, what's going to happen to its pressure?
Goes up.
Decreases.
So the first action that we discovered for this hormone is that it releases sodium in urine. That's why we call it atrial natriuretic peptide. So all of them here, as you see, are increasing your blood pressure. Angiotensin 2, epinephrine and norepinephrine, ADH, antidiuretic hormone. All of them are increasing your blood pressure. The only one that decreases your blood pressure is going to be the atrial natriuretic peptide. Atrial natriuretic peptide, again, I am losing sodium in urine. This decreases my blood volume. Let's look at the organ level, tissue perfusion. If I have a vessel here, let's say this vessel is supplying my kidney, and I have an increased stretch of this vessel. So this vessel is going to my kidney. Increased stretch, this means you have more or less blood, or high or low pressure. If I have increased stretch,
More blood.
means
More.
more pressure. I have a high pressure disease, increased stretch means high pressure. So if I have a high pressure within my artery, how this artery will respond, do you think? On itself, by itself. It's an auto-regulation. Would you like this artery to dilate or to constrict? What do you think? If I have a higher pressure of the blood getting into my kidney through this artery, so this artery is detecting an increased stretch. Would you like to dilate?
Dilate.
And when you dilate, what's going to happen? More blood will get into the kidney. So you're going to be damaging the kidney. So what you're going to need to do? You constrict. So you see on here, this is my myogenic effect. It's totally the opposite. It's exactly the opposite of what we've mentioned here of the hormonal and neural regulation. If I'm detecting an increased stretch in my peripheral arteries, this means I am getting too much blood into the organ. And I want to reduce this amount of blood. I need less perfusion. So here the response is going to be totally different. If I detected an increased stretch of the arteries getting the blood to my organ, those arteries will respond by performing vasoconstriction. Did I affect the mean arterial pressure in this case? No. Because this is one vessel that will respond. I am regulating just the amount of blood going to this specific organ. I am not performing a generalized vasoconstriction or a generalized vasodilation. I'm not getting the signal from the brain affecting all the arterioles. Here, the artery is responding on its own. If I'm getting too much blood to the kidney, this will cause a deterioration of the kidney functions. So I need less blood to flow in here. And if I want less blood, you're going to constrict the artery, not dilate. And this is exactly the opposite when you regulate your blood pressure, your mean arterial pressure. But here, what is the difference? This is one artery that will constrict. Here, I am dilating all the vessels. I'm dilating all the arterioles. Here I have generalized regulation of the mean arterial pressure. Here I have a localized regulation of the tissue perfusion coming to this specific organ. So don't get confused. How come when I detect increased stretch, he mentioned on the first slide that we're going to be doing what? To the vessels? Dilation. And then a few slides after, you're going to constrict. So you understand, what is the difference between this one and this one?
This one's for all
This
the
one,
vessels.
all the vessels are responding to generalized disturbance in my blood pressure. But here, this is a localized regulation. I'm only regulating the amount of blood going into this specific organ. Let's do the other thing here. So if I did detect decreased stretch on the wall of my vessels, this means my kidney is receiving less or more than what it is supposed to get. Less. And if I receive less blood flow, do you want to constrict to prevent the remaining blood from coming in?
No.
Or you want to dilate? Dilate. So if I am regulating the tissue perfusion, it's a localized regulation. And this will be exactly the opposite of what you're going to be doing in a generalized regulation. What if, for example, let's say my muscle. So the muscle blood vessels are detecting less flow. Less flow. And how do I detect less flow? Let's say I am detecting, other than stretch, I will be detecting increase in the amount of carbon dioxide. An increase in my acids, or in other words, reduction in pH, or a drop in the blood oxygen level on the muscle. So what do you think? The chemoreceptors here located in my vessels at the muscle level, would you like to dilate the vessel or constrict the vessel?
Dilate.
If you have low carbon dioxide at the
Dilate.
muscles.
Dilate.
If I have low oxygen, high carbon dioxide, this means you are receiving enough blood or not enough blood? Not enough blood. So I need to increase the blood flow. And how do I increase the blood flow to this specific muscle? Dilate the vessel. See on here? How I did respond? Constriction. But this is again a generalized regulation. This is localized. So whenever you detect increased carbon dioxide, drop in your pH, the reduction in the oxygen level, on the organ level, the vessel will respond by dilating. What if I have the opposite. I have an increase in the oxygen level, more than what I need. I have a drop in my carbon dioxide level. What do you think I will need to do? Constrict or dilate? I will need to constrict. Why do you need to constrict?
Because its change is not.
Because you are getting too much blood beyond your needs. I don't want more blood to come to my muscles. So I will need to reduce the amount of blood. So I will need to constrict my vessel. So here, metabolic controls, if I have declining oxygen, accumulation of hydrogen or acids due to the metabolic activity, accumulation of potassium, adenosine, prostaglandin, all this will mean I don't have enough blood flow coming to this organ. What is the significance here of the adenosine, of the potassium? Those are intracellular structures. So if I've got potassium outside, this means what for me? This means I have cell death. Cells of this tissue are dying and they are releasing their contents to the outside. So if I have lots of adenosine, are you supposed to have ATP outside of the cells? No. You're supposed to keep the energy inside the cells. You don't have ATP, you don't have adenosine outside. If you see adenosine outside, this means the cells are dying. And if you have cells dying, this means you are receiving enough blood or it's not enough. The amount of blood that you're receiving, it's not enough. So this means you're gonna dilate or constrict. If you're not receiving enough blood, you I'm not receiving blood. Would you like to constrict to block any blood?
Dilate.
You dilate.
Right.
Open the flow. Blood flow.
Alright, so here, relaxation of the vascular smooth muscles. Also going to be triggered by the nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a major factor that causes vasodilation. Nitric oxide causes vasodilation by relaxing the smooth muscles of your vessels. Vasoconstriction on the other side is going to be under the effect of the sympathetic stimulation and endothelium. Alright, whenever I detect drop in the oxygen level, whenever I detect increase in the carbon dioxide level, this means I need to increase the amount of blood flow. Whatever, so you dilate. You constrict in case of too much oxygen reduction in the carbon dioxide level. Myogenic control. If I have an increased stretch, passive stretch, this means you're getting too much blood. And if you're getting too much blood to this organ, how would you respond? You're going to be responding by performing vasoconstriction. If I have reduced stretch, less stretch, this means you are not getting enough blood. And if you're not getting enough blood to this organ, you need to dilate the vessels. Please, when you study this part, put them next to each other like I did on here. For you to be able to differentiate between the generalized regulation and the localized regulation. This takes place if I have drop in all my arterial blood pressure. Here, this takes place if I have a reduction of the blood flow to this specific organ. This is generalized, this is localized. Again, generalized, how I will have generalized regulation by nervous system, neural regulation, and my hormonal regulation. Localized, how do I regulate the tissue perfusion? By myogenic and metabolic controls. Myogenic, if I have increased the stretch, you constrict the artery. If I have reduced the stretch, you dilate the vessel. Metabolic, increased carbon dioxide, increased acid, reduction in oxygen, dilate. It's the opposite, you constrict. Alright, so this diagram summarizes all what we've mentioned so far. So again, which ones would be constricting, which ones would be dilating the vessels? Reduction in pH. This means you did accumulate acids. Acids means you have high metabolic activity beyond the supplies that you are receiving. You're not getting rid of those acids in your kidney. Less perfusion. And if I have less perfusion, this means less tissue perfusion. This means I need to increase the blood coming to this organ. And if I need to increase this blood, you dilate. Same for the oxygen. If I have low oxygen, this means I need to get more blood to this specific organ. So you're gonna dilate. If I have increased amounts of carbon dioxide, potassium, prostaglandins, adenosine, nitric oxide, those are intracellular, or they are waste.